Good afternoon and welcome to the FEMA Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness webinar series. My name is Allison Albright and I'm the Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. The archived event will be available on the FEMA website in the coming weeks. You should hear audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure your volume is turned up so you may hear the proceedings accordingly. In the top right corner, we ask if you'd like to receive news and updates from Region 2. If so, please enter your email address and we'll be sure to add you to the distribution list. We will have a question and answer session after all the presentations. Today, you'll see a Q&A pod in the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Finally, the PowerPoint presentations from today will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF. You can click on the file and download it using the download button. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the Region 2 Community Preparedness Officer to introduce our speakers and today's proceedings.
Did you know that FEMA's #1 goal in our strategic plan is to build a culture of preparedness? The Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Program is focused on preparing individuals and communities for disasters by providing useful information and training, inspiring people to act and be ready for any emergency. Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Costa, the Community Preparedness Officer for FEMA Region 2. On behalf of our team working to strengthen preparedness across New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, I'd like to welcome you to our Preparedness webinar series. I'm pleased to be hosting today's webinar on the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, also known as the NSGP. This webinar will provide information on the NSGP program and application process. The webinar will feature guest speakers from FEMA, the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, New Jersey's Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, the Virgin Islands Territorial Emergency Management Agency, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Our first speaker this afternoon is Brian Thomas from FEMA. He serves as a Senior Watch Officer, Situational Awareness Unit Leader, Radiological Exercise Evaluator, and Regional Fire Program Specialist for FEMA Region 2. Brian, I'd like to hand the mic over to you.
Thanks, Deb. I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Folks, I want to thank you all for joining us here, whether you're calling in from New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, or the Virgin Islands. Thanks for taking the time out to learn a little bit about the nonprofit security grants. Deb already introduced me. My name is Brian Thomas. I work in the Grants Division at FEMA Region 2. And just a quick recap, if you're at the beginner level here as far as FEMA grants go, I just want to take it from the top and give you a really broad overview of the program. And the reason why I'm going to do it in a broad sense is because we have subject matter experts from each of our areas of responsibility. As Deb and Allison mentioned already, we have someone from New York, someone from New Jersey, someone from Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands that can meet your specific needs if you have technical assistance questions. So taking it from the top, just to reiterate the mission of FEMA, if you've been around for a while, if you worked with FEMA before, you might remember it used to be this really long mission statement. But they really cut it down about 2 years ago. And really all it is, it boils down to this. FEMA's mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters. And that's where this grant program comes in to meet your needs, helping you especially before a disaster even happens. So the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, its main purpose is to provide funding and support for target hardening and physical security. So if you're not familiar with what target hardening is, what we would consider a soft target is a gathering of people that have little to no protection around them. So if you wanted to consider a target hardening project, that might be something like traffic barriers or CCTV, something to make your facility, your organization, a stronger, harder target if you're under that unfortunate circumstance of being a target for a terrorist activity. And it looks like I lost my spot on the slides, but here we go. Okay, so now I just want to make one thing especially clear to you folks in the nonprofit world here. When you are applying for this FEMA grant, you are not applying directly through FEMA. You are going to apply through your SAA. And those folks are the ones that are going to be speaking to you after me on this call. So what happens is you put together your application and you submit it to the state. The state will review it, and then they'll make their recommendations to FEMA, who will go ahead and review from there. So each state, whether it's New York, New Jersey, or the territories, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, have their own way of having you log into a system and submit. I know New York uses e-grants. New Jersey probably uses something else, but they will talk to you about that a little bit later on in today's presentation. So up front, probably what you're most curious about is what is up for grabs? What are you competing for in this application process? And the answer is there's $90 million set aside. Now, I just want to make something clear. This $90 million that I'm talking about, and most of the specific things I'm talking about during today's presentation, relate to last year's Notice of Funding Opportunity. So the Notice of Funding Opportunity for 2021 has not yet been released. However, once it does be released, I'm assuming that it's going to be very similar to last year's. So this $90 million figure, this relates to what was available in 2020. In 2021, it might go up a little bit, it might go down a little bit, but I just want to make that clear. So you'll notice that that pot of money, that $90 million, is broken into two sections, okay? $50 million of that pot of money is set aside for nonprofit organizations that are inside of an urban area. Now, the other pot of money, $40 million, is set aside for nonprofits that do not fall under the category of an urban area. Now, I know that sounds a little confusing, and I just want to make it crystal clear for you. So if you are applying in the state of New Jersey, the only urban area is Jersey City and Newark. Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone has their phone muted on the other end because I hear a little bit of an echo. Now, if you're applying...
Brian, 1 second, the speakers all need to have their computers muted completely.
Yeah, my computer is muted.
Okay, thanks.
So if you're applying within the state of New York, the only urban area is that New York City area. If you do not fall within Jersey City, Newark, or New York City, then you're going to have to apply for the state pot of money, which is that $40 million. Okay? Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands do not have an area that falls into the urban area pot of money. You apply for the state pot. Just another very important number is that $100,000 number. That is the maximum amount that you can get through this award. So if you're applying for your agency, make sure that when you're putting your budget together and your project plan, it's not going to cost you more than $100,000 because that's the maximum amount you can get. And last but not least, for this award, there's a 3-year period of performance. And all that means is once you get awarded the grant, you have 3 years to complete the project that you said you were going to do. So determining eligibility, really the main eligibility for you to be eligible for this grant is that you're a 501c3 nonprofit. Okay? Now, I just want to ask one more time, if there's a speaker on that does not have their phone muted, if you can mute it now, that'd be great. So 501c3 nonprofit organizations are eligible. What's going to make you an attractive candidate once you're determined to be eligible is that if you can identify any prior terroristic threats or attacks against your organization, if you could describe how your organization or your facility has a symbolic value, or if it's recognized as a tourist attraction, if it's some sort of national or historic institution that causes it to be a possible terrorist target, that is what's going to make you an attractive candidate for this award. The reason why we're saying this is because this nonprofit security grant, it's really designed for those folks that are potentially in harm's way of a terrorist attack. This is not to, eliminate shoplifting or to catch graffiti artists. This is something that is really designed to make yourself a harder target, and that's really what we're looking for. Also, when you're putting together your narrative, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, we really want you to focus on what is your organization's role during a disaster or in response to a disaster. If you have any type of role in those two areas or those two arenas, that's something that you definitely want to make sure you put in your narrative section. Now, this last bullet is pretty important. The folks from CISA are going to talk about this, but if you put together a risk assessment, that comes up with a threat or a vulnerability that they found during the risk assessment, that's going to go a long way in your application. So not only is it mandatory to have that risk assessment conducted, but the findings that come from that risk assessment are going to help you to be a valuable, a more attractive candidate for the award. And just real quick on the timeline of this grant program, we're expecting the application period to open up in spring. That's not official yet because, as I said before, the NOFO is not out yet. Once the NOFO is out, it will tell you exactly when the application period opens up. We're expecting that period to last anywhere between 45 to 60 days. So you're going to have some time to type up that investment justification, which is also known as the narrative. But that's not something that you have to wait for the application period to start to do. You can get that going right now. You can start working on your narrative or your investment justification now. So once you put together that investment justification, the SAA is going to score it and refer it to FEMA. The highest scoring folks are going to be sent to FEMA for their evaluation. And then once all the final scores are determined, the awards will be made usually about 60 days from the time you hit the submit button. You know, once you hit submit, you're really going to wait about 2 to 3 months to find out what the final scores are. And then once the awards get announced, like I said before, from the time you get the award given to you, you have 3 years to complete your project.
Brian, I don't want to interrupt, and if I missed this, I apologize, but did you explain what SAA is?
Yeah, it's the state authorizing authority, and we have those folks on the line to elaborate on how they, as the SAA, are going to help the organizations with their applications. Did I get the state authorizing agency? Maybe Mr. Abramson can clarify the acronym for SAA. State authorizing agency. State administrative agency. Sorry about that. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, each applicant is going to be rated on the need and the impact that the grant will have. So really, when you're putting together your investment justification or your narrative, you really want to hit on the need you have for whatever you're asking for, and how is it going to impact not just your organization, but the community as a whole. For you being better prepared, how is that going to protect these people in your community? Now, there are some performance metrics, priorities that we want you to keep in mind as you're putting together your application. You really want to hit this home. So a goal of this grant program is to enhance the protection of soft targets in crowded places. So how is this project that you're working on, how is this piece of equipment or this security system that you're asking for going to enhance and protect the soft target? And also, how is this project going to mitigate the loss of life or loss of property against threats and hazards? That's what we want you to focus on in your application. How this project will enhance your protection and mitigate loss. So the performance metrics that you have to mention in your application, we want to know what percentage of the funding you're asking for is going to be spent on contract security, what percentage of the funding you're asking for is going to be spent on target hardening, or what percent of funding is going to be spent on training and awareness campaigns. You know, if it's 100% in one, that's fine. If you're spreading it out amongst those 3 different metrics, you know, when you're putting together your budget, you're really going to have to figure out how much is going to go to this area, how much is going to go to this area, and then and organize your budget in that manner. So for pre-award process, there are some things that you can do before you open up the application, before you get started. Some of the things you can do is really, you know, in the essence of it is, what is the problem that you have? That's what we want to know. So identify what the problem is, and then identify what the solution to that problem is, okay? Once you've identified the problem and you come up with a solution, and the solution is really what you're going to be asking for in your application. So you identified the problem, you know what the solution is, now you want to put together the project. You have to put together a project plan that says, if you get this grant money, how are you going to spend it? If you've done any market research on security systems, if that's what you're asking for. How are you going to play out this project from start to finish? How long is it going to take and how much is it going to cost? I also want to say, before you start your application, always read through the NOFO. I mentioned it before. The Notice of Funding Opportunity has not yet been published, but it is coming soon. Once it is published, really take a hard look at it and find out what's eligible, what's high priority, and how does the project fit into what you're trying to do. Now, just for ease of access, if you look in the file share option, Allison alluded to this before, I see a button here that says download here, and there's 4 documents there. One of those, the top one, that is the NOFO from 2020. And like I said before, I think it's going to be very similar to the one that's going to be published in the next couple of weeks. So take a look at the NOFO and see if the things in there meet your needs, and start thinking about your project plan and how you can put together a plan to use that money. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those other documents in there in a second. Write a comprehensive investment justification, also known as a narrative. I think I hit on that before, but I'll talk about it a little bit more in the next slide. Recognize all the allowable budget and line items. That's going to be found in the NOFO. NOFO has all the things you need to know and more, but another great resource for you is the Preparedness Grants Manual. And that's a simple Google search. It's a big document. If you go to Google and you just put in FEMA Preparedness Grants Manual, you're going to find a lot of really valuable information in there that's going to help you put together a strong investment justification. Just a couple tips here for grant writing. Always read the directions, find out what they're asking for first before you, go off on a long-winded narrative. Ask questions, be compliant. The way you can be compliant is by reading the NOFO and including the things in the NOFO in your investment justification. Use the format that they ask you to do. If there's a way that you can incorporate graphics into your IJ, definitely do that. Pie charts, bar charts, whatever you can put in there. As always, write clearly. You definitely want to have a clear, concise explanation, especially when it comes to your project plan and your budget. Always seek someone out to proofread your documentation. You want to make sure you're putting together a well-written piece of narrative. And carefully prepare your budget. And I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. So when you're putting together your budget, obviously you always want to make sure that that is mathematically accurate, that the bottom dollar matches up with all of the things that you planned on spending money on in your project. Okay? Make sure that your line items tie back into what you wrote in the narrative. So basically, you have a line item that costs this much money. What is the cost benefit there as it relates to your narrative? How many people is it going to help, and how is it going to help? Contingencies and risks are planned for and budgeted, and also no supplanting is evidence. So what we mean by that is, if you already have money set aside for CCTV, but yet you're asking FEMA for an award for CCTV, just make sure that there's no supplanting evidence, and make sure that you can explain your budget properly and clearly. So some things that would make a strong narrative, the things that the reviewers are looking for is the problem well defined? Okay? Spend a lot of time talking about how this problem, you can't overcome it without federal assistance. You can't overcome it without the grant money. Definitely take time to clearly define what your problem is. And then again, right on top of that, how does the solution correct that problem? So, problem and solution have to be clearly defined for sure. So I talked about core capabilities for FEMA. If you look in the file share option and you go to the core capability one, that's the second document in there, you're going to see, it's a long document. You really don't have to go through the whole thing. But what you want to do is you want to tie in your core capabilities with what your problem and your solution is. So an example of that is, if you have the time to download the document or look at it, you'll see right on page 1, under the section of protection, there's a lot of core capabilities. There's 11 core capabilities under protection. And most of these are going to tie right into your narrative, and they'll probably tie right into whatever your problem and solution is. So, you're going to look at physical protective measures, and you're going to find out how that ties in by using this document. Screening, search, and detection, especially screening, that's another core capability that you could expound upon in your narrative. The number 1 under protection is planning. So if you plan on spending any of this money on planning and exercises, this is a good core capability to tie into your narrative. So by putting this in the file share option, really what we're doing is just giving you another tool that can help you, put together a strong narrative. So read through those things in the file share and see how, once you define what your problem is and what the solution is, how does that tie into the core capabilities in that document. Okay? So when you submit your application to the SAA, and they'll probably go into a little more depth than I will on this, but really you want to make sure that you list what your mission statement is. You have to attach your vulnerability assessment, which the folks from CISA are going to talk about in a moment. Your IJ, or investment justification, that's also your narrative. If you have more than one site, if your organization has different campuses or different sites, you have to have a different justification for each site, so one per site. Any supporting documentation that you have, if you did some research on how your facility or organization is a terrorist target, and there's been studies about it, or there's any supporting documentation you can put, if there's a history of terrorist attacks on your organization, and you can put some supporting documentation on there, that would go a long way in your application. And then last but not least, for your application package, the SAAs that are on the phone are going to tell you any of the ones that are specific to your state or territory. So as far as the FEMA portion goes, that's the broad overview of what the nonprofit security grant is intended to do, is intended to help you. It really is, it's a target hardening grant. How is this going to make your facility more secure? And now, if you have any questions on that, you can contact the Region 2 Acting Division Director in the Grants Division, Tanya Headland. Her contact information is up on there. Also, I believe my contact information was posted earlier on in the segment, but please feel free to reach out to me. This is a FEMA headquarters run program, so the folks at FEMA headquarters would be a little more versed in some of your technical questions. But then again, that's also why we have the folks on the state here today to help us out. So that takes up my time. I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. We spoke about how much money is available. We spoke about which areas are considered urban areas. And if you don't fall within Jersey City, Newark, or New York City, then that would mean that you'd apply for that $40 million pot. That's, you're within the state, but you're not in an urban area. You have to be a 501c3. Okay, so that concludes my time. Deb, Allison, if you want to move it along, thanks for taking the time to listen to me.
Yeah, Brian, just quickly, so somebody asked, specifically regarding the urban areas. So New York includes the 5 boroughs, correct?
That is correct. New York City, 5 boroughs, right?
Okay, right. So Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island. And then there was also a comment about New Jersey urban areas. Does that include, is that Morris, Hudson, Union, Middlesex, Bergen, Passaic, and Essex, including, and then Newark and Jersey City? Do you know?
So, yeah, well, I was going to say we got our New Jersey guy on the line. So, Dan, maybe you could expound upon that.
Yes, it definitely does the 7 contiguous counties and 2 core cities, as well as our 5 MSA counties. New Jersey is one of the few states in the country that opens it up to the entire metropolitan statistical area.
Excellent. Thank you. And with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Dan Morocco. He is the Bureau Chief for the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness in New Jersey. Dan?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to allow me the opportunity to speak to you. I hope that you, your families, and your congregations are doing well in light of everything that we're facing with this pandemic, and I hope everyone remains safe on the go forward. And that maybe there is some light at the end of the tunnel. In the interest of brevity, I will not be repeating everything that Brian had just spoke to. He did an eloquent job. What I will let you know is that New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness is the SAA. And I think many of you already know that all applications for the federal NSGP program must come to our office. And that we do refresh our website and provide a lot of information at njhomelandsecurity.gov concerning the federal program, as well as the New Jersey Nonprofit Security Grant Program. We have a host of recorded workshops, as well as a voice-narrated PowerPoint that will guide you through the process. We expect that the NOFO will be released possibly this week. And in that instance, we'll take a day or so to consume the notice of funding opportunity, and make sure that we push out all relative information concerning this grant program, and more importantly, any changes that might occur. We want to make sure that we get the communication out loud and clear. So I'm not going to repeat everything, the elements of a proper submission. That was covered in great detail. But please, regarding the federal nonprofit security grant program, visit our website. We'll be refreshing that in the days to come. Regarding New Jersey nonprofit security grant program, so you know, we recognize the importance of these programs in a preparedness sense. One of the things that we find hugely beneficial is the relationship building that we do with our nonprofit partners because of these grant programs, both state and federal. I doubt that we'd be engaging the way we are now in an intuitive sense, in a preparedness sense, that grows security to make our state, to make our country safe, a safe place to visit and a safe place to live. That is really our goal, is to grow safety for all of us. And we value this partnership in so many ways, whether it's working with you to build out your VRA, identify vulnerabilities, or whether it's the pleasure of working with so many of you post-award and during the period of performance in building out capabilities that protect you and your congregations. That's what this is all about. So with regard to New Jersey's program, it is a dynamic process. In fact, we are reviewing the newest piece of legislation. This is the second legislation that I just put before you that defined and expanded our nonprofit security grant program from security personnel only to security personnel and target hardening equipment, two separate programs under one umbrella. The latest iteration, which is Assembly Bill 1663, is in draft form, and we had eyes on, and we're looking to forward to this next iteration that will continue, I believe, will continue in a very favorable way, grant funding opportunities to continue to grow capability and security. So more to come on 1663. As many of you know, here in New Jersey, we do have the two programs and the ceilings. There are two separate applications. Again, visit our website. The ceiling for the security personnel program is $10,000, and it is a one-year period of performance. The ceiling for the target hardening equipment program is currently $50,000, and that comes with it a two-year period of performance. A lot of it, substantively, these programs marry up to a great extent to that of the federal program, with some exceptions. For example, M&A is not permitted in our program as of now, and we really do value that fact because we believe that measures to grow capabilities in terms of security are really the most important purpose of these programs, and we're looking to hopefully maintain that. But there are some subtle differences between the federal program and the state program. Eligible nonprofit organizations may apply. The criteria for the federal program is the same as the state program that was already gone over. The difference is, while you may be able to apply for both programs here in New Jersey, you will only be awarded one program should you rise to the top in terms of being that organization at the greatest risk of a terrorist attack. Applicants who apply for both programs, the SP, security personnel, or the, for target hardening equipment, will be asked to select a preference during the application process. And the way the legislation is currently written, preference will be given to the applicants who have not received security grant funding in the past two grant cycles. All right, so we talked briefly about, I hope this comes up okay. Obviously it didn't, but all right, I got it here. There are three important mission areas: prevent, protect, and mitigate. Prevent acts of terrorism, protect our citizens, residents, visitors, and assets, and mitigate the loss of life and property by lessening the risk associated with terrorism. And really, that's the core of why we're doing what we do. Eligibility requirements are identical to that of the federal government. There are no variations in that. Again, we'll have this information on our website, that what constitutes who are eligible as well as a proper submission. Much like the federal government, this is a competitive grant program. So we do provide detailed instructions on what constitutes a proper application. And, you know, it was already reinforced, be sure to have somebody review your applications. Quite often there's information either in the wrong box, or you might be a little light in describing vulnerability, consequence, or threat. And it's always good to double-check your submissions, to double-check the substantive narrative that's in there, to really make sure that it's a well-written, well-represented document, given the competitive nature of this program. And there are point reductions for little things that we indicate in our website that you should be mindful of. There are no, it is a reimbursement grant program, much like the federal program, and there are no cash advancements. These are just some basic information. All right, and it looks like let me see if I can get this to all come up together. So I mentioned before that for both the federal program, in which New Jersey Office of Homeland Security Preparedness is the SAA, all applications must be submitted to our office for the federal program. As far as the state program, all applications must be submitted to the State Office of Homeland Security Preparedness as well. And we do have an electronic application system on our website, which we'll be activating upon the open application period. If you do have questions, we are open to questions via email. And then, again, I encourage our New Jersey constituency to visit our Homeland Security website, click Grant Opportunities, and we do have 2 links, one for the federal program and one for the state program. And by the way, the state program, we just finished administering. We had open application period very recently, and we just awarded funds for both the security personnel and target hardened equipment earlier this month. We don't expect to have an open application period for New Jersey's NSGP until perhaps later on this year. So again, we will refresh our website, but just continuously visit our website in terms of the open application period for the NJ NSGP program. So that's it that I have at a very high level. Again, I am so excited about these programs. It's really incredible to see some of the outcomes, some of the successes. We have published some success stories relative to these programs and the really important investments that have been made. And I look forward to growing partnerships with those who have yet to become involved with these programs. It is a process. We do put forward a business model that is important to us, that provides transparency and 100% accountability, this being post-award. We do hold workshops for recipients and so forth. So that's about it. I can turn it over to Deb or Allison, and then I'll be available for questions later on.
Thanks, Dan. And we are going to hold the questions until the end, but I have one quick question for you. So I realize that you guys put all the information about New Jersey's grant program on OHS&P's website, but is there some other mailing list that goes out at any point, or other avenues that you use to announce the NOFO?
Yes, we do a lot with the Interfaith Advisory Council, which is attended by a large number of houses of worship along many denominations. A lot of this information is pushed out through our social media platforms when it becomes available, and then we try to give updates periodically through that platform. So the Interfaith Advisory Council is a strong working partner with our office, and many of the information relative to the grant program are discussed at their recurring meetings and updated at the recurring meetings as well. And again, we do use that various social media platforms to push out relevant information.
Okay, and we could share your contact information or